which is, for me, I actually sort of don't like that word, because usually it's what the Christian fundamentalists calling it Darwinism when it's evolution. There have been a couple thinkers since. Okay? So your question is, Jack's smarter than me, let him ask the question.
Well, I think what he's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what he's saying is that taking a certain worldview, a certain belief system, and using it for evil cuts both ways. He was giving an example of somebody slaughtering people because on their assumptions that were rooted in evolutionary theory, they weren't human yet, so they felt perfectly rational and justified in slaughtering them.
We don't have to go to New Zealand to do that. We can do it right here. What's the whole thing?
I have Native American.
I know. And that's an example. What was the rational cause they came in with to displace the and kill them? What was it called?
Manifest destiny.
Manifest destiny. It is our manifest destiny. You know the last time I read that? 10 years ago in the Barometer. Someone was arguing that in the Barometer, one of the editorial people. Probably in Congress. So I think you're right. You're right. I said rationality can result in evil things, dangerous things. All you need is enough people to come together and say, those are savages, we're going to kill them. Let's go on a buffalo hunt, and then we're going to go on an Indian hunt. There was no difference. You know, I taught at the University of Copenhagen. I taught African music. That's actually my specialty. And I taught there, and I was teaching all these marimba stuff, and some of the Danish teachers, one of them called it the monkey music room. You know, I think he'd been wearing a hat too long. And you know what Denmark's like. It's just dark and there's nothing there. Go ahead.
So what are the roles and the rules for presuppositions in your thinking?
Are you differentiating presuppositions from assumptions? I don't know. There's any rules. Do you know any rules and rules?
Well, see, if I understand what you're getting at, if the debate is about rationality, the problem is that the nature of human reasoning is such is that we usually reason from a set of assumptions, a set of presuppositions, and some of those are predisposed values. And what you're arguing is, if your values are wrong to start with, you may be very intelligent in deriving the implications of those values, but you've got rotten values to start with. So when it comes to rationality, what?
How do you choose your presupposition?
Okay, so how do you choose your presupposition and values? So what you're going to start with? Okay.
You got it.
Well, my answer to that is rationally. And like I said, I think you can make mistakes, but I think reason is self-correcting. I mean, there are cultures who have made horrible moral mistakes based on bad assumptions, and the conscience of that culture was awakened, and they came to realize we've made horrible mistakes here. And I think that's important.
Jack's going to agree completely with me and no one with someone else. And what I'll say is I base it on the oldest written assumption coming from India that says basically treat other people the way you want to be treated. That's my assumption.
Hey, you over here in blue? Okay. Dr. Crabtree, just sort of a question about your definition of rationality. One of your first points was that human rationality is our ability to competently construct a picture of reality that matches the way things are. And the obvious corollary to that is that the only way that we know the way things are is through rationally arriving at those conclusions, which implies that there's a reflection of the world, like as we gather evidence and understand it and then come to a rational conclusion about it. But at the same time, you seem to have sort of divorced your definition of rationality with the gathering of evidence. So I'm sort of wondering how you...
Divorce, I'm sorry. I've done my divorce.
Oh, you've divorced your definition of rationality from the idea of gathering and presenting evidence. So I'm trying to figure out how you come to terms with those two different concepts.
I'm assuming that. I'm assuming as we just live life experience, or if not ordinary experience, do research or whatever, that we are confronting ourselves with that reality and the facts that we have make sense out of. So I'm just assuming that.
Okay, so you do believe that you need to be able to articulate evidence for beliefs?
Well,
for rational beliefs, I mean?
No. But see, the key in what I'm saying is, it's one thing to have evidence, it's another thing to be able to articulate the evidence. Those are two entirely different things. I may very well, it comes back to the tacit dimension of knowledge and understanding and rationality. I may very well know what I know, but I'm going to have trouble articulating it to you. Let me give you this example. There was I read in the book about a radio debate between two people about the existence of God, and they were looking at the traditional arguments for the existence of God and arguing back and forth about whether those arguments were valid. And a woman called in and said, "What are you guys talking about? Just look out the window." Now, on the one hand, that we could look at that and say, "Oh, how unsophisticated! You know, she's just not up to speed on what this is all about." On the other hand, it may have been the profoundest comment that anyone made, because I don't believe in the existence of God on the basis of some traditional argument for the existence of God, but I would say that I think that some of, not all of, but some of the traditional arguments for the existence of God do seem to capture a basic fundamental, they sort of roughly and vaguely point at a rational intuition that I have. And I say, yeah, that's getting at why I believe in the existence of God. But when you try to articulate the argument as a formal argument, I'm not even happy with it. I'm not even satisfied with it.
So you're saying
but
that
it doesn't mean I don't know.
So
And it doesn't mean that my
intuitive
commitment is
than-
not rational. I'm
it's
sorry.
more intuitive than like a conscious
Exactly.
accumulation of data?
Exactly. And most of what we do rationally, the most important work that our reason does is more intuitive and tacit than is formalized and systematic.
It's interesting because when you were talking about looking out the window, I was calling a class I had on Aquinas. And it was a Jesuit, and he was saying, of course, we have this whole thing that translates into the immediately observable, which is the assumption on which scholasticism and Thomism begins. And so the teacher said, look out the window. See the grass? It's green. And that ended the discussion because he said, what do you mean it's green? How can you say it's green? Somebody at the end asked me why I posited this question of why, treat each other the way you want to be treated. And I was thinking of a wonderful book that is one of the most deeply spiritual books I've ever read. It's called Venus and a Half Shell by Kilgore Trout. And in it, a one-eyed spaceman who lives forever, his robot sexy wife, an owl, and a dog travel the universe to find out why it was that these aliens came around and flooded the Earth. And the question is, why are men born to suffer and die? And after about 20,000 years, he gets to the end of the universe, and he meets old Bingo in a bar who's drinking beer, and he says, well, Bingo says, I know the answer. And he says, well, what was the answer? Why are men born to suffer and die? And old Bingo said, he belched and said, why not? And I think that's my answer to why not? Why not treat people the way you want to be treated?
Repeat the question and speak slowly and loudly.
Do you want to hear how I'm going to solve all these problems I mentioned? Okay. Remember that Augustine had decided that it was through orgasm and implantation of the seed that original sin was passed along. And that he had come from an ascetic tradition himself, but he assumed that basically couples should live together as married, but kind of like good friends, and they should have procreation only for the sake of having children. And so he was actually tortured about that. Think about it. You're passing on original sin, and what are you supposed to do? My conclusion is this. There are two ways now, at least, that we can solve the problem of reproduction. One is cloning, and the other is using in vitro fertilization. Now, think about this. How did God create Eve? He reached into Adam, grabbed some of them, and cloned her. She doesn't have a belly button, right? She just cloned her out. And so, therefore, that is a good reason to continue cloning. And what happens then, of course, is that we don't have to worry about reproduction anymore. We can control our population. We can control birth control. It's not an issue. We can controlling the question of abortion, and not only that, but we can give up worrying about sex. We can celebrate it. I think we should open sports clubs for it. Classes. Does that sound rational? How many people agree with me on that? I have a consensus.
I don't have enough information
We're
yet.
rolling along so that the speakers can answer more questions.
Okay.
And what you say is very interesting, but there are lots of hands up.
Girl in the brown sweater.
Okay, I feel like we've gone around in a few circles, and I wanted you guys to redefine what you're using as your definition for rational, because I heard you say that it's the ability to competently construct a picture of reality that matches the way things are, and I heard our other speakers say that from the dictionary definition it's having reason or understanding, but then you both agreed when you talked that it's just consensus. So I'm wondering if I exist alone, can have any kind of rationality if there's no one to have consensus with me, because you use dual definitions.
I did not agree that it's consensus.
Oh, that was the first thing you said.